Thank you so much for speaking to us, Haimanot Teferra, IMF Mission Chief to Kenya. Right into it. This review was a combined review, seventh and eighth review. Maybe just for context setting, for those of us who might not be familiar, why is it that the seventh review was delayed to this point?
First, thank you, Julian, and it's great to be here to speak with you. I wanted to talk about the seventh review. As you recall, we had a staff level agreement back in June, but as things have evolved very differently than what envisaged, where we had, as you know, the protests that happened in June, July, which end up with a very unfortunate outcome of lost lives and damages. We had to reflect to see what can be done in terms of really, I mean, the seventh review is about supporting Kenya in terms of the economic challenges. So the delays reflect the rethinking that needs to take place and to see what is a different path that we can take to achieve the economic stability, and at the end of the day is to help Kenya to come out of the debt challenges that it's facing. So really that's what the delays were taking this long to get here.
Thank you. And now getting into the outcome of yesterday. So we've seen a release indicating a combined disbursement of about $606 million. If you look at the borrowing plan from the National Treasury, they had penciled in $874 million, both ECF, EFF plus RSF. And many of us are asking ourselves, what explains this variance in terms of the quantum of the disbursement?
When we have a program, each review is a chance for us to reflect on performance and including financing that the fund provides. And as you know, the fund program or the fund financing is grounded in a balance of payment needs. And so we've assessed to see what the balance of payment needs are. And it's in that context that we have looked at what we can provide at this juncture. But at the same time, I wanted to say that recall that this is just a 7th and 8th review. The program hasn't ended. So the total access amount provision under the program remains as what was discussed and understood in the context of the budget that you've just mentioned. That is, the context that I wanted to put forward. And obviously, we look at also the type of reforms. There are two programs associated. One is the ECF, EFF, which is the general way we engage in terms of the economic policies. And then there is the RSF, the Resilience and Sustainability Facility, which is linked to reforms that are, related to addressing Kenya's climate vulnerability. As you know, Kenya is really highly exposed to climate issues. We've seen droughts, we have seen floods, and so there are reforms to address this resilience. And it's in that context the financing is provided once the authorities complete the reforms they have agreed to do so.
Piggyback on that point, when I was doing my math and looking at their program expectations, I felt as though the key variance here emerged really from the disbursement assigned to the RSF. Is it a fair assessment that there could be areas where Kenya is having challenges when it comes to the RSF as far as agreed upon commitments are concerned?
I wouldn't put it challenges as per se. When the RSF gets approved, we have a number of reforms that are agreed, and each reform, there's a financing tied to each reform. And there's a timeline at the time of the approval of the RSF when the authorities indicate they believe they will be able to complete those reforms. And it's in that context. And then the associated financing is approved by the board in terms of when it would be available, right? So the reforms are all pretty much in every areas. They are making a lot of progress, but some of them are taking longer than we expected because, you know, there are several processes maybe at the beginning that was not anticipated. So it's not uncommon. And we see that in many other programs. You know, the RSF is really different than the ECF, EFF in a sense that once a reform is completed and delivered is when the financing is available. So in the context of what we expected to be done by this time, not all of them were completed. And in that sense is what you've said is correct, that this will have to be pushed to the next time when this is completed, and we will be able to assess and present to our board when they're completed.
Mission Chief, is it possible to get specific areas where we have not met the RSF reforms as agreed?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, you know, in a day or two, our staff report will be out and we'll have much more details of the areas. But if there are, I believe, about 4 reform measures which we anticipated would have been completed by now, but pretty much most of them are almost there or partially completed. And this are, one is on which we have already indicated in our 6th review, the reform measure related to carbon pricing. And one key issue here is, you know, whenever we consider this type of policy, we need to think about also revenue recycling to make sure that the impact on the vulnerable is mitigated first and that we have the right framework in place. So this is, you know, something that takes time. And we have reported in our last staff report in January that we anticipate this is going to take longer than anticipated. So there should not be any surprise there. The other one is related to integration of climate risks and the way projects are appraised. Again, there's quite significant progress there, but it's not fully completed yet. So we anticipate this will likely be completed next time we take this to the board. The third one is, you know, there was the fiscal incentives framework that was approved. And so what we need to see is adoption of those in selected sectors, including, like, for example, agriculture and so forth. So that's still ongoing as well. And then the final one relates to adoption of 2 regulations to promote energy efficiency. One relates to net metering, which that we understand that this has been done. And then the second one is the open access. We know the regulation, a draft regulation is out for public consultation, and there's work still ongoing in that sense. So once this is, you know, the consultation is completed and all the issues are addressed, and finally the regulation is approved, then we would consider this reform also met. So so those are where the delays are.
Thank you for that, Mission Chief. Next question is around waivers around revenue targets in June and December, and what you anticipate forward. Have there been any commitments by the Kenyan government around reviving some of the Finance Bill 24 measures with regard to revenue raising?
Okay, so, you know, waivers, you know, when we set targets in a program, it is really with the view of achieving the objective of the program. And one key objective of this program is really to reduce Kenya's vulnerabilities, debt vulnerabilities. And, you know, since the last review, these vulnerabilities have increased, you know, with the fiscal evolving differently than what is envisaged. And in that context, you know, the waivers are because the authorities have put corrective measures in the context of looking at how to reduce the debt vulnerabilities or the dynamics that we've seen in the context of the supplementary one that was approved in July. And I think there is a clear understanding also more time is needed for the authorities to really engage with the public in terms of making the case why the revenue mobilization strategy is an important part of Kenya's policy. I think the public have asked, they wanted to see more accountability and transparency in public finances. I think that's rightly an important question. And in that regard, they're considering, as you know, requesting a governance diagnostic. They requested a diagnostic to help, see how they can address that. Also, there is a need for them to communicate more effectively what the fiscal strategy is. So in that context, the program looks at what are the efforts and the strategies that are in place, and that the authorities' key commitment is that they will proactively look at the fiscal developments and address as the emerging challenges come into fix. So whether it is on spending side or revenue side, I think both will be very important. And I would not go into saying, bringing something back and all that. I think the strategy has to be guided by the existing medium-term revenue strategy, which really is about focusing on improving the efficiency, equity, and progressivity of the tax regime. And in that context, I think they are looking very closely to see and engaging the public and also the parliament to see what would be feasible. So I think that is the commitment that we have from the authorities.
The release last evening from the fund sounded very optimistic around Supplementary Budget 1, which we saw coming earlier to remedy the expenditure side. If you look at it in terms of the fiscal deficits at about 4.3% of GDP, which pretty much is at the ceiling of what has been agreed upon with the fund, are you concerned going forward in terms of the prospect of Supplementary 2, given the sort of unfunded requests we saw coming in Supplementary 1?
Okay, I mean, you said optimistic about Supplementary 1. Maybe let's stay back. I think we see Supplementary 1 as a stopgap measure. As you know, the way it was done, it was really a top-down kind of spending cuts to address the gap that was created from the withdrawal of the finance bill, partially. But at the same time, it is such that it would help at the minimum stabilize the debt and try to bring it down. So the supplementary, I would see it as more of a temporary stopgap measure so that it gives the authorities a bit of time to really engage the public on what needs to be done, because I think there is a need to really put all the possible options and the challenges that the authorities face. Julian, as you know, Kenya government has a really difficult job of balancing competing needs. One is, you have a quite significant debt service coming due in the coming years that the government and the country is committed to address. And then you have also quite large social developmental needs that the government needs to, mobilize resources to address that. And, the revenue performance has not been great in terms of trying to meet these needs, right? So it is a balancing act, a very difficult one. But at the same time, I think we do believe there is a feasibility to get where the country needs to go, but it requires, both in terms of public finance transparency and accountability, but at the same time, so clearly communicating effectively exactly what the authorities are planning to do and why. And so it's in that context I would see the supplementary, or even if there is a need, a supplementary to down the road.
Tell me how far we are with the governance diagnostic, which the government of Kenya sought.
So the governance diagnostic, as you know, was requested during the annual meeting. The authorities have met also the different departments that actually do this work. So we are in the process of identifying a team to, that would be appropriate for delivering on the diagnostic. As the name says, it's a diagnostic tool. Based on the experiences that we have had with other countries, it takes several months, 6 to 8 to 9, or even up to a year to really do a good job. And it's not just work with the authorities, but it really reaches out to different stakeholders in the country. And so, you know, we are at the stage of really trying to identify the right team and then looking at, you know, what would be the appropriate time to start the, you know, launching the mission, which will be a number of times to make sure that, you know, we identify, you know, the right stakeholders who to discuss, and at the end, you know, come up with the diagnostic that identifies where the weaknesses are, or, you know, the vulnerabilities to corruption, and then also, you know, provides recommendations on how to address them. And it's not just for the fund, but it's for all the stakeholders, or including other development partners, you know, where they can engage Kenya to really address this issue.
I mean, thank you. I can see I'm running out of time, but I want to close with a very quick question here. So given what we have seen in terms of the quantum of disbursement and the fact that IMF has expressed concerns about Kenya tapping into facilities like the UAE $1.5 billion loan, I was struggling with the reconciliation of these two. So on the one hand, IMF says, look, you need to come for more concessional financing, don't go into commercial, but we have a leaner disbursement than the government had projected here.
Julian, I think the way we look at any financing, whether it is with bilaterals or any kind of financing, is in the context of whether this adds to the Kenya's debt burden or helps mitigate the burden that they already face, right? So it's in that context where we look at any facility that the authorities are considering, and, you know, we continue to engage to see what is feasible, what's out there. You know, we also engage with other partners to see how we can support Kenya. So I would say that, you know, this is an ongoing discussion, and it is also in the context of the fiscal developments, the framework that we have going forward, to see what is feasible and how we can actually bring Kenya out of the predicament in terms of the debt vulnerabilities that it faces.
Thank you. I'd like to close by asking you to give any parting shots if you have, because I think I have wrapped up on my questions there.
No, I think maybe one thing to say is really, at the end of the day, this program or any of the engagement that we have with Kenya is about the Kenyan people, to make sure that, you know, the challenges that the country faces are surmountable, and, you know, it evolves in such a way that at the end, the benefits is to the wider public. And I wanted just to make sure that we continue to think of it that way, and we will continue to engage and see, to make sure that we deliver also in our part to support, like any other members, also to Kenya on ensuring macro stability and economic prosperity.
IMF Mission Chief, thank you so much for speaking to us this afternoon.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Bye.